welcome on in to another episode of Getting Well with Terry and Friends, NHL Season Preview Show edition. And today we get to talk about the Dallas Stars, a team that squeaked into the playoffs last year and had a little bit of an interesting offseason. We'll just jump right into it here. We may have another person joining us throughout the show. So if he comes in, we'll throw him in. He may only be able to be in for a few minutes, so we'll see what happens. But starting with additions and subtractions for Dallas, when you look at additions, the main addition that they made was Mason Marchment, a free agent signing. They also got Colin Miller and Will Butcher, defensive depth. But that's basically it. They didn't really add a whole lot other than Mason Marchment there, Riley Barber as well. Going out, Mestikov, Joel Esperance, Colton Point, Blake Como, Braden Holtby, John Klingberg, Michael Raffel, Alexander Radulov, and then Andrei Sekera retired. So definitely more subtractions than additions when it comes to the Stars. I think losing Klingberg is definitely going to hurt the defense. Radulov was kind of degressing anyways, but I still think will affect the offense there. Overall, in the offseason so far, I think it's more negative than positive here for Dallas. But they still have some cap space, and the season hasn't started yet. So they could possibly make some moves here, but we'll have to see. Ian, we'll go to you next. What do you think here, additions and subtractions for the Stars?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple big losses, John Klingberg being the big one. Very good signing by Anaheim, although I was surprised they only signed him for 1 year. You think you'd want to lock him up for a longer term, but 1 year it was. But it'll be a loss on that blue line because you got to fill the minutes. You got to fill the play in every situation's role that Klingberg played for this team for the last few years. But, it can be done. Their blue line still overall, when you look at it, they're going to need more from Heiskanen, Lindell. Yoni Hakanpää was a pleasant surprise. So there's guys that can fill that void, but you're not going to get all the offensive upside from that blue line position there that you got with, obviously, John Klingberg there. Blake Como, veteran guy, gone. Braden Holtby, all the injuries. Not a surprise that he's not retained. Radulov, again, streaky. That's the best way to put him. He's always been that way in terms of offense. And, of course, Andrei Sekera retiring, which is not surprising. Guy just couldn't stay healthy. So the big one, though, is Klingberg. I think everyone else pretty much replaceable. Nemesnikov, someone that we think could be a good depth piece elsewhere, and that they're not going to have him. But, the big one, obviously, Klingberg. Colin Miller's a veteran defenseman, but again, this guy's had injury issues lately. Vegas, Buffalo, last 3 or 4 years. I mean, he's not been able to play for a full 82 games. That's concerning. Will Butcher trying to get some defensive depth. Not surprising they went the blue line route with losing, obviously, Klingberg. Sekera retires, so you got to fill those holes. The one I love the most is Mason Marchment. We know it was a breakout season for him last year. Very impressive. He got more ice time. He was put in a top 6 role when he started to percolate offensively, and he showed he could live up to that role. So he had his career high in goals, points, the best season he's had in the NHL. And for a Dallas team crying out for offense, it's a nice fit. I think he's going to get a showcase type of role here too with Dallas. Whereas Florida, they're so loaded up front that probably third line, maybe a second line spot from time to time if there's injuries. It's about the ceiling for Marchment in Florida. Here in Dallas, I could easily see him being on a second line, easily. And I think they might give him a shot up that high in the lineup. Hopefully Peter DeBoer, not one of my favorite coaches, but hopefully Peter DeBoer sees the potential that Marchment has to really, provide this offense with a shot in the arm. But definitely Marchment, the highlight of the signings for Dallas in the offseason. That was a good one. I like it.
I totally agree. I was speaking about Nathan earlier, who I hope will be able to join, but if not, he really hated a bonus. So he was so happy that
Nate
Bonus got fired. and then he finds out he gets Peter DeBoer, and it's like, are you kidding me? Like, I can't be happy for 5 minutes, and you're going to do this to me again. So yeah, that's poor Nathan, poor Stars fans. But Nick, what do you think here about Dallas's offseason?
Yeah, obviously the big name we all see on that one is John Klingberg. That was one of their top that was their top defenseman. And apparently their game plan was to go pick up depth defense pieces from the Buffalo Sabres with Colin Miller and Will Butcher. Apparently that was the solution to that. I like the Marchment addition. You need offense on this team. The Dallas Stars look like the West Coast Islanders or the Western Conference Islanders, where they have top defense, really good goaltending, but their offense is anemic. So that's why I was asking all offseason to see Trotz go to the Stars. I was really hoping that he would, because I thought, and I would have probably bet the Stars to at least make the playoffs, if not make a deep run with that defense and the goaltending with him behind the bench. But Peter DeBoer, yeah. But yeah, this for me, I'm obviously some depth. Some guys they lost were kind of like those depth pieces or guys who were getting a little older, regressing, stuff like that. Which probably means we're going to see a decent amount of the younger guys from them this year that they're going to have to bring up, because obviously they didn't add much back. So it's going to be interesting to see what they come up with for our lineup. I like the Marchment addition, but they did lose a little bit with Klingberg there. So I think it was a little bit more negative than positive here with addition subtractions. So I could see them potentially being a couple points out from the playoffs with those moves.
Yeah. Dallas is a hard team to figure out playoffs wise. We'll get there at the end, but they're a team where it could go either way. I don't think they're a slam dunk to make it or a slam dunk to miss. They're kind of right there in the middle.
I misspoke earlier, not misspoke, but I forgot about the connection between Mason Marchment and the current head coach, Peter DeBoer. Peter DeBoer, when he coached in San Jose, Brian Marchment, of course, tragically passing away far too young, the father of Mason Marchment, Brian, worked in the San Jose organization, actually worked with Peter DeBoer, knew Peter DeBoer very well, Brian Marchment, and apparently Brian and Mason both knew Steve Spott very well. And Steve Spott's been an assistant coach for Peter DeBoer everywhere he's gone, pretty much. San Jose, he took a Spott with him to Vegas. I'm sure Spott's on the assistant coaching staff here in Dallas. So it's kind of like that. He got people that are not extended family. I don't know if Mason was that close to DeBoer and Spott, but people that his dad knew very well and was friends with through working together. So I think just having that comfort of, people that are on this Dallas coaching staff, I think that's probably a big reason, not just, the team situation, how good they might be or bad, but I think it was that element too that attracted Mason Marchment to Dallas. I think that played a huge part in it, that there's connections to his dad in Peter DeBoer and Steve Spott on that Dallas coaching staff.
Interesting. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so very interesting. We'll look at top prospects, upcoming free agents for Dallas. Prospects wise, Thomas Harley, Dallas fans, but the organization as well are very high on him as a defensive prospect. They got 3 centers here that are among their top prospects. Ty Dellandrea has had opportunities, but hasn't been able to make the team yet, but still looked at as a guy with a lot of talent. Dallas, prospect-wise, definitely not one of the top teams, but they've got some center depth here, and if some of these guys can turn out, it's hard to find good centers in the NHL. So if they can get some guys here that turn out to be good, that will really help them. Looking at upcoming free agents, obviously Rope Hintz, the number one name on the board, but he is an RFA, so there isn't too much worrisome. They should definitely be able to get a deal done. Dennis Juryanov as well, Jacob Peterson, Marian Stunetic, not too familiar about him. Joe Pavelski, will they resign Pavelski on a 1-year deal to keep him in Dallas? We'll have to see. but he has been productive. Dallas was, I think, one of the only teams willing to offer him the 3-year deal. Most teams only wanted to give 2, but he's still been productive. We'll see in this 3rd year if he can keep that going. Kiviranta, they're probably going to want to sign him as well. So they have some guys coming up here they're going to want to sign. And currently they still have one unrestricted free agent, which is a defenseman. Let me go down here. I think it's a defenseman. I can't quite actually remember, but they have one guy who's still not signed. Or Jacob Robertson, sorry, it's a forward. Jacob Robertson, they still haven't signed him, but I expect them to get a deal done with him for sure. Nick, I know you don't really follow prospects too much, but what do you think about the upcoming free agents list here for Dallas?
Yeah, I think probably Hintz is going to be re-signed. Peterson's got to be re-signed. You got a decent core there. I would hope you would re-sign them there. And I don't see this team as much as I've mentioned with other teams that had a decent amount of free agents, where it really depends on how well they did that season. I think that the Dallas Stars are going to just try to continue to build around this core, so they're going to want to re-sign those guys long term. Kiviranta, I think, is probably the more important one out of the unrestricted free agents if I had to pick one to sign. And then because Pavelski, he's good. He's getting up there in age, so who knows what they're going to re-sign him to, maybe another year or two. But I think probably Kiviranta is the one they're going to focus on signing the most, if I would have to guess. But yeah, some of those restricted free agents, they should re-sign because they have a decent core there with Hintz and Peterson. So probably they'll probably look to sign those guys, and probably for the UFAs, it'll be depending on how well they do this season.
Yeah, and it depends what Pavelski wants, because if he still wants big money, after signing Hintz, they still have to sign Robertson and the other guys.
Sagan signed for way too much too.
Yeah, for a long term as well, but there may not be money for Pavelski. We'll have to see. Ian, what do you think about prospects and upcoming free agents for the Stars?
Yeah, for a team that's been in the playoffs now multiple years, the last 5 years in a row, not bad. The prospect pool's not totally ravaged, like it's been for, your Washingtons, Pittsburghs, teams like that. No, there's still some decent prospects still in the cupboard for them. Wyatt Johnston stands out, first-round pick 2021, MVP season in the Ontario Hockey League this past year. And at the time, people questioned that pick. People saying that it was a little bit of a reach for Dallas to take him. And boy, were they rewarded, at least in the way he played in junior last year. Looked like a dominant center, driving the play offensively, seeing the ice well, setting up his line mates, finishing around the net as well. Great finishing and distributing the puck as well for Wyatt Johnston. So a great year for him in the OHL. It basically rewards Dallas for good scouting. Because there were people questioning that at the time. Their scouts have done a good job. They've hit on some players that were down the draft board a little bit, second, third round, and they've turned out to be a little bit better. Logan Stankoven, another one that they are very, very high on in terms of his upside at the NHL level. Maverick Bork's on your list. Keep an eye on some of these defensemen. They don't have as many in terms of back-end, high-end prospects, but, they still have Jack Barr, who they say is going to be pretty good. The recent first-round pick, Leanne Bixel, they say is going to be a pretty good defensive presence, and he can move the puck out of his own end with a good first pass as well, which is good to see. Artem Grushnikov, someone who I actually saw very close and up close here with the Hamilton Bulldogs here the last couple of years, and Grushnikov certainly looks like he's just one of those going to knock you down in front of the net, play good defensively, active stick, good defensively. I don't think the offensive upside's there, but, there seems to be more and more of these blue liners that give you the shot, the point production, the skating ability, the mobility, the moving of the puck. You still need some of those sandpaper, shutdown, stay-at-home defensemen, physical defensemen, blocking shots. That's what Grushnikov can give you. So, he's on the horizon as well for the Dallas Stars. And they've got a bunch of goalie prospects. They have actually a bunch of options. We know Jake Ottinger is clearly their future immediately and will be probably their number one. But there's other options if something were to happen to Ottinger. Adam Scheel, Remy Poirier, they just drafted Maxim Mayorov, as well. So they've got lots of depth in their goalie prospect chain right now, Stars as well. So all things considered, for a team that's been in the playoffs 4 or 5 years now in a row, they got a decent prospect pool at the moment. As far as the free agents go, a lot of decisions are going to be on the horizon next year. I mean, Rupe Hintz will be important as a restricted free agent. I mean, Denis Gurianov suddenly became one of their more important players up front last year. Peterson and Studenic are pretty much, depth players. So they'll Hintz and Gurionov certainly will be the priority in the restricted free agent category. And then they got a huge amount of decisions to make with their unrestricteds. You're going to be torn on Pavelski because Pavelski's not getting any younger, but he's just so important. How many big goals has he scored for Dallas in the playoffs the last few years? He's just a big game player, big game performer. And, unless you're sure you're going to be rebuilding after this year, and you think if you want to contend for the playoffs next year, how the hell do you not re-sign Pavelski? Because he's a big game playoff type player for you. So that'll be a tough decision. But like I said, he's not getting any younger, and there is a cap hit involved. So, but Luke Glendening, I think more of a depth player, so they may not have enough room for him. Yoel Kiviranta is someone they want because I think there's upside and improvement there. Kiro hasn't really progressed to the level they thought, so I think it's probably more likely than not that he may not be retained. Same thing with Fredrik Olofsson. So again, the free agents, it's going to be a busy offseason for Jim Nill, a lot of decisions to be made. And even for a team that's made the playoffs, like I said, a few years in a row, the prospect cupboard ain't empty right now.
For sure. We'll look at a possible lineup for the Stars going into this season. So I do have Mason Marchment on the third line, but Tyler Seguin, Jamie Benn, Pavelski. I know Pavelski will probably play with Hintz, but Robertson, Hintz, Gurianov, Marchment, Faksa, Kiviranta, and then the fourth line is completely a question mark. We could see any of these guys on the fourth line. But overall, I like the top three lines. I like the players on the top three lines. Looking at the defense, Lindell and Heiskanen, Old Man Suter and Colin Miller, Harley, Yankampa, and then Joel Hanley and Will Butcher are there as well as possibilities. Anton Khudobin currently injured, and then with goaltending, Ottinger, Wedgwood, and Scheel. I don't know a whole lot about Adam Scheel, but looking at the goaltending here, I think if Ottinger was for some reason to get injured or to have a sophomore slump, I think the Stars could be in trouble goaltending-wise for this year at least. So they're really hoping Ottinger, who I really like. I think he is a true number one in this league. But in my opinion, at least. But the Stars are definitely hoping he is, because if not, they could have a bit of a goaltending issue here. But overall, a solid lineup. Just they didn't really get too much better, and a lot of those Pacific teams did get better. And I could see it being hard for the Stars to make the top three. And I don't know if they can get a wild card spot. There's some questions with that. So overall, the lineup, not bad, but maybe not that good, kind of mediocre. Ian, what do you think? Possible lineup for the Stars?
Here's the issue with Dallas, okay? They've got a good lineup and a good enough lineup to be in the playoffs, potentially. But if they want to guarantee they make the playoffs in a tough Western Conference, you need Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn on board every night playing their best. And the problem is you don't get their best every night. And you get nights where it's the proverbial Ian Cameron classic line. You can't find him with a telescope on the ice. I mean, you get those nights with those two guys way too often for the type of caliber player they should be. Jamie Benn, it was a pedestrian, kind of quiet, 18 goals, 28 assists, 46 points last year. Tyler Seguin, 24 goals, 25 assists. He's had a lot of 30-goal years. I mean, I don't want to be – it's not like that was terrible, but he's had a lot of 30-goal years, and when he doesn't hit 30, I view that as a mild disappointment when it comes to Tyler Seguin, who, let's be honest, is a limited player. He's there to score. He's there to get on the score sheet, produce offensively, and if he's not doing that, There's other things that he's not as physical. He's not going to play all the penalty kill minutes all the time. He's got to produce offensively if he's going to be the value you want. Because to me, he's been usurped, in this lineup by Jason Robertson as the go-to offensive player on this team, who's just had an outstanding season last year. And there were times he was carrying the offense for the Stars. 41 goals, 38 assists, 79 points last year for the Dallas Stars in 74 games. So more than a point per game per player was Jason Robertson. So you got to hope that duplicates. He'll be counted on to get you, at least close to a point per game this year. Rupe Hintz, like his game a lot, 37 goals, 35 assists. Pavelski's going to give you 81 points like he did last year in 82 games. You can't ask for more than that. He can still play at a high level. I have no worries about Robertson, Hintz, or Pavelski. I know those guys are probably going to deliver for me. I need Ben and Seguin on board. They've got to pick it up. Simple as that. I mean, they've got to be better than they were offensively last year. Denis Gurianov, I like the way he played down the stretch for the Dallas Stars. He's got to do it for a full season, but at least later in the year, he started to get that offense going. Now we need to see it for a full season from Gurianov because he should be better than 31 points in 73 games. And a lot of those points, like I said, came late in the season for them. So those are the keys. Guryanov's got to take a step. I think I'm going to get a good season out of Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski, and I need Ben and Seguin to show up for 82 games, not 42. All right, in terms of effort, in terms of production, in terms of an impact, in terms of being noticed on the ice. Defensively, it's going to be tough to fill the hole left by the absence of Klingberg. Old man Suter, as you called him, Terry. He doesn't have much left in the tank. He's not going to fill that hole. Heiskanen is going to be asked to do a lot more, but sometimes he's a little bit soft in the physical department. That's got to change. Same with Lindell. Lindell doesn't mind getting scrums after the whistle, but you hit him during the play, he just kind of shies away from that. I like Hakanpää. He's a physical player. He'll step in and he'll play good in the defensive zone. But then there's questions with 5 and 6. What are you going to get out of Hanley, who's a depth defenseman? Colin Miller, who's a good defenseman, but not healthy all the time. What are you going to get from 5 and 6 in that blue line? There's some question marks. You could actually be playing with 3 sturdy defensemen this year if Ryan Suter's no good again. So that's the problem for Dallas. That blue line certainly has some questions. They're going to have to hope some of these prospects that I just mentioned, maybe make a statement in training camp, push for a roster spot. They're fine in net. I like Scott Wedgwood as a backup. He's capable. He's solid. And Jake Ottinger's the guy anyway, and I have not many concerns with him. I mean, we saw what he did down the stretch in the playoffs. He was outstanding. He's clearly established himself as the goalie of the future for the Dallas Stars, and he's probably the future is right now because he is the guy now moving forward. So I'm fine with him in net. He's a well above average goaltender. They almost stole the series against Calgary because of him. They're fine in net. I've got worries about the blue line depth. I've got worries about, after the Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski trio, are Ben and Seguin going to show up every night? Is Gurianov going to be improved? Can Marchment duplicate, if not keep improving on what he did last year in Florida? And what else are you going to get from the bottom forwards? Because the depth is lacking a bit there. So there are questions at depth with forwards and the back end.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll look at their point total, their last 5 years, and what Dallas has done here. And we'll look at their future odds. Just let me bring it up. So the last 5 years, consistent. Basically around 90 points in 3 of the years. Obviously, the 2 seasons that they didn't were short seasons. So, but they were on their way there for sure in 2019, 2020. First round exit though last year. They did go to the Stanley Cup 2019, 2020. 94.5 points. That's really tough. 98 last year. I could see them right around 90 to 95. So if I had to go with something, I'd probably go with the under. But it's not a super confident play because if Ian's right and guys like Seguin and Ben do get it together, both of them, what I wanted to mention earlier, also are making over $9 million a year, and are by far the highest paid players on the team, so they have to produce. But if for some reason they have a bounce back year, both of them, their prospects, like this team could be really good if everything turns out well for them. So I'm not rushing to bet the point total. To miss the playoffs, I think there's value with no, just because of the teams in the Pacific improving. But plus 140, not a bet that I want to wait all year for, unless I'm super confident, and I'm not, because I could see Dallas squeaking into the playoffs. I could see them missing it to win the division, to win the cup. Neither are bets that I would place. But nobody really thought they'd make it in 2019, 2020. And that's the great thing about the NHL is we do have surprises. Teams, all you have to do is make the playoffs, and then what happens there happens. But this Stars team, a hard team to figure out. If I had to go with anything, it would be under in the point total and no to miss the playoffs, because I could see them finishing with like 90 points here. Nick, what do you think? Futures and last 5 years for Dallas?
Yeah. Well, looking at their projected lineup, seeing that you completely skipped over me for that segment.
I was about to say, didn't we miss Nick with that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
There's only 2 guests on here, Terry, and you skipped one.
I'm so sorry. When I try to change it up on who I go to, so I'm not going to the same person every time.
I was damn sure we didn't hear from Nick with the lineup, and
then I ended up skipping people. So I'm sorry, Nick. What do you think about the lineup here?
I think that other than losing Klingberg, like they look very similar to last year, and I think we can approach betting them the same way as we did last year. And I think they're going to be an under team because Jake Ottinger is a top 10, if not top 7 goalie in the league. Potentially has the upside of being a top 5 goalie in the NHL. So this is the team that even when their blue line has question marks and struggles, I can see them getting bailed out by Ottinger. So this is a team that I'll probably look to bet a lot of unders with this year, unless we see what Ian mentioned. So we actually get production from Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin. Other than that, I think this is an under team for sure. So that's kind of the way I would look at this roster.
All right. And futures, what are you thinking?
Yeah, futures, it seemed a little confusing. I can see them being on the outside looking in. I can see them sneaking in. I see them just right around potentially a wild card team, but they lose a wild card to a Pacific team. So they're one of those where I'd probably lean towards the no to the playoff, just because I see them as a potential wild card team at best. And that would mean that there's the decent chance that they would miss altogether. So especially when you see plus money on teams that I think are a wild card team at best, I think that the percentage wise will point towards there being value in that prop. But other than that, like no division, no cup. I think 4 teams I would rather bet to win the division than the Stars, with St. Louis, Colorado, Nashville, and Minnesota. So I think that probably Dallas sits 5th in that division potentially. So this one's not one I'm particularly looking to play any futures with.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. It's a hard team to get a grasp on. Ian, what do you think? Futures and last 5 years for the Stars?
Yeah, here's the issue with Dallas. I'm a little bit more negative on them than positive. I'm looking to bet maybe the under 94.5 with them, but this is all about division placement. If they're in the Pacific Division instead of the Central Division, it's a dead nut slam dunk. I'm on the under with this team. There's no question about it. You were to put Dallas in that, absolute meat grinder of a division with Calgary and Edmonton and improved Vancouver, and I think what could be improved Anaheim, and Vegas is still capable, and go on down the list in that division. They're going to get eaten alive, maybe Dallas in that division. The problem is they're in the Central. And, most of your games are going to be, and you're going to get a bunch of games when you're in the Central playing Arizona, playing Chicago, playing a Winnipeg team that I think might be even worse than I initially thought next season after what I saw today, stripping the C from Blake Wheeler. Not that, Blake Wheeler's been good. His offensive games declined, but that seems
he's about to have a career year now that they pulled that from him. Look out for him.
Look, yeah, he might definitely be motivated to step it up, but that's just odd Okay, that's just odd that, a coach comes in and all of a sudden take the C off him and there's going to be no captain next season for the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, you talk about Philly starting off with Tortorella with some dressing room issues. You clearly have them with Winnipeg because that dressing room fell apart last year, and now it's up to Bonus to put it back together. And from what I see, this is going to be a hell of a job to put that back together. So the problem is that division Dallas is in, they're still better than Winnipeg. They'll get wins against them. They'll get wins against Chicago. They'll get wins against Arizona. Because to me, I see three great teams in that division. That's it: Colorado, Minnesota, St. Louis. And I think after that, I don't even think Nashville's phenomenal. I put them closer to the bottom teams than I do the top teams. So that means Dallas has got a little bit of an easier path to go over 94.5 points. And keep in mind, they got 98 points last year. So they could fall by a couple, 3-4 points. And to me, it would be either too close to the number for me to bet it. And I don't like that they're in the much weaker division in the Western Conference, top to bottom. That's going to keep me off the under, but I absolutely do lean to the under. And like I say, to make the playoffs, I think that's the best way to go. I think a no at plus 140. I'd rather do that than take the under 94.5 points, because this is another scenario where, like in the East, I think both wildcard teams could be Atlantic teams, the better top to bottom division. Same in the West, where I think both wildcard teams could be Pacific teams, the better division top to bottom. And that could keep Dallas out. So no plus 140 for me. And to miss the playoffs, I think there's enough price there that I'm interested in that bet.
All right. And that is the Dallas Stars show for today. Originally, the Minnesota Wild show was going to be tomorrow. I think I'm going to do some rescheduling and get it on during the week next week. So no NHL show tomorrow, but we'll have the normal baseball show tomorrow, and then the baseball football show Sunday. So make sure to tune into that. Follow Nick and follow Ian. Their links to their Twitters will be in the description below. But thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you again for more NHL previews. Have a good one, guys.